All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to unpack a major philosophical shift that, according to the analysis we're looking at, didn't just stay in a dusty old book, it went out and completely reshaped the world we live in.
You ever get that feeling that truth itself, that reality, is somehow up for grabs? Like the values we all thought were solid are just constantly shifting under our feet? Well, the source material for today argues that you're not imagining it. And that feeling, it has some very deep, very specific philosophical roots.
So think of this as a kind of philosophical detective story. We're going to trace that modern feeling all the way back to its source. We're going to find the exact moment when the very definition of reality was put on the negotiating table. Okay, so our investigation starts back in the early 20th century. Back then, the dominant idea was something called metaphysical realism. Basically the belief that a real, objective world exists out there, whether we like it or not. But then in 1927, our big clue appears, a dissertation from a philosopher named Sidney. Our source argues this document is the smoking gun, the moment a radically new idea started its long march through America's institutions.
So who was this guy, Sidney? Well, he was a student of the legendary philosopher John Dewey, and he put forward an idea that was frankly a huge break from thousands of years of Western philosophy. We're not talking about a small tweak here. This was a proposal to change the entire job of philosophy itself.
Now, what you're seeing here is the absolute heart of the argument. For centuries, metaphysics was all about asking, what is truly real? But Hooke, taking his cues from Dewey, just completely flips the script. He says metaphysics doesn't tell you what's real. Nope. It just gives you a summary of the tools and methods that worked for us in the past. It's not a map of reality anymore. It's more like a user review of our best problem-solving gear.
And that shift from what is to what works is everything. It's the core of this entire story. So let's really break down what that means by putting the old way of thinking and the new way right next to each other.
So first up, the classical view, metaphysical realism. This is the search for being. The idea here is that things in the world have a fundamental, unchanging nature, an essence. And the job of a philosopher is to go out, discover what that essence is, and understand it.
And this chart just lays it out so clearly. On the one hand, metaphysical realism. Its goal is to reveal being. It believes in fixed natures. Its focus is on ontology, the study of what is. On the other hand, you have the new kid on the block, pragmatist instrumentalism. Its goal? Just summarize methods. It doesn't believe in fixed essences, only in constant change and continuity. So you see, the whole game shifts from asking what is to asking what works.
What this means in practice is that the idea of being basically gets collapsed into the idea of doing. In this pragmatist world, reality isn't something you find anymore. Reality gets defined by whatever actions are successful. What is real becomes the exact same thing as what gets us the results we're looking for.
Okay, so that's the heavy theory. But what happens when an idea like that escapes the philosophy department and gets out into the wild? Let's take a look at how, according to this analysis, this one idea became the blueprint for so much of our modern world.
The analysis we're looking at makes the case that this pragmatist idea, this rejection of fixed natures, is basically the philosophical DNA for a whole host of modern programs. Think about it. If you don't believe in a fixed human nature, then you have to focus on process, on managing group dynamics, on emotional states, which, sounds a lot like the core ideas behind things like social and emotional learning or DEI initiatives.
And you can trace the ripple effects even further out. For instance, if there's no higher transcendent moral law to discover, what do you get? You get legal positivism, the idea that law is just whatever the people in power say it is. If there are no timeless truths to pass down, what do you get in schools? You get things like values clarification, where kids are told to just invent their own values. It all flows from that one original move, denying that anything has a fixed essence.
And that brings us to the most powerful critique in the source material. The argument here is that this new kind of metaphysics doesn't just build things, it also creates a system that's designed for permanent revolution. A metaphysics that, by its own rules, is built to destroy itself over and over again.
So here's how that engine supposedly works. Step 1, you deny that anything has a fixed nature. Simple enough. Step 2, you build a brand new system based on process, on what works. But here's the catch. Step 3, a core part of the philosophy is that nothing is ever final. So that new system you just built, it immediately comes under attack for not being the final answer. Which leads to step 4, you have to tear it down and reconstruct the whole process. And then the cycle starts all over again. The big conclusion from this analysis is that this perpetual motion machine, this endless cycle of tearing down and rebuilding what counts as true, is the metaphysical engine that drives our post-truth world and all the civic instability that comes along with it.
So if we had to boil this entire 100-year story down to one single transformative insight, it's this. Pragmatism, especially through Sidney Hook, triggered a monumental pivot away from the ancient question of what is
and toward the very practical question of what works. But, and this is the final brilliant twist, it then takes the answer to what works and uses it to turn around and completely redefine what is. It's a total inversion of how we used to think about reality itself. And all of this leaves us with one last, very big question to chew on. If our shared reality is now based on what works, it kind of begs the most important question of all, doesn't it? In this new world, who exactly gets to decide what works? Thanks for joining us.